And maybe, well, maybe I'm asking you too many things, but one question that arose as you were talking was, do you have your own preferred explanation for what is known as sexual dimorphism? That is to say, there is a pronounced difference in the average size of males and females?
Yes, but the problem is also to understand why there is sexual monomorphism, because sexual selection sort of is all about explaining why there is dimorphism, but as we all know, there are a huge number of species in which there isn't any dimorphism, not the least of which are, guinea pigs that people have, that you have to, take them and look closely in order to tell them apart. Interesting cases of monomorphic species are the penguins, and
Sure, but if you look just within primates, evolutionary psychologists have pointed to a pattern that is suggestive, which is to say, the greater, you might say, the more polygynous the species within primates. You compare gibbons, which have a lot of very little sexual dimorphism and are relatively monogamous, to gorillas, which have a lot of dimorphism and are quite polygynous. And the point is that there is a pattern here, which is that the greater the variance in reproductive success among males, the more sexual dimorphism there is. Now that certainly seems to me quite consistent with an emphasis on sexual selection, although it may not be the answer. But again, I would say, evolutionary psychologists, they're quite aware of the variation in species, and they often use that and try to correlate it with other variables, as in this case, to test claims about the evolutionary origins of human nature.
Well, I don't know what you're asking me. I don't want to conduct, a detailed critique of evolutionary psychology on the fly like this. What are you asking me exactly?
Well, why is it that the correlation I just described between sexual dimorphism and degree of polygyny within primates, why is that not evidence in favor of a sexual selection type of explanation? Why does that not seem to be? Actually, there's two different scenarios you could throw in. One is, but certainly one is female choice. There's another one I have in mind that we don't have time to get into. But I guess you haven't thought about that. But so there's no point in asking you to interpret it. But
I have thought about the evolution of dimorphism and monomorphism, but I see them as coupled problems. I'm serious about that. And our understanding, the model that we have for the evolution of dimorphism has to do with the finding the ecological circumstances in which it's advantageous for males to form power-holding cliques. And when there are power-holding cliques that are economically advantageous, then that sets up a selection pressure for admission tickets to get into them. And so the admission tickets are then the source of the ornaments and of any other aspects of the dimorphism. But our interpretation of it as well is that it's not limited to males. So the spotted hyenas are very interesting, as you may know, in that the females have penises, and these are a kind of ornament, and these would appear to also be used by females as admission tickets to female power-holding cliques. On the other hand, you get local ecologies of the sort that the penguins are living in which we hypothesize that it's not economically advantageous to have power-holding cliques there, that they're foraging at will, or at random, if you will, out in the sea looking for fish. There's nothing to defend. There's no advantage to being in a clique. They're not capturing fish that require more than one animal to cooperate in bringing it down. So our interpretation of the evolution of sexual dimorphism traces to the local ecological conditions under which it's advantageous to have cliques and therefore admission tickets. And the kind of example that you're going into, where you say, look here, let's look only at the primates and let's look at their mating systems, and don't we have a pattern? The problem with that is that you haven't got an alternative hypothesis on the table that could also explain the pattern. There hasn't been the kind of intellectual effort into conjuring up reasonable alternative hypotheses. And it can't be science until you actually put an alternative hypothesis up against it. It's not enough to say, to build a pattern, to mine for a pattern, and then to say, well, this is consistent with sexual selection, so therefore sexual selection has to have something going for it. It remains to be seen whether or not sexual selection has anything going for it.
Yeah,
and
I actually wouldn't claim that the correlation I cited is clear evidence of sexual selection as opposed to other explanations. I mean, I've never really. I haven't thought it through. I mean, I'm very aware of the correlation. I think it's very significant. And I do think sexual selection is the best explanation. Is the explanation that most naturally springs to mind. But the thing you said about the coalitional thing is interesting because you didn't use the term coalition. Power sharing cliques. It seems kind of applicable to a species like, say, chimpanzees, which have these coalitions of males. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. I would say I think evolutionary psychologists, there may be more disagreement among them than you realize. There's a lot of disagreement among them, but I think you're right.